So Clark, I was thinking about this. We've been talking back and forth about, are the Dolphins going to give him a contract? What are we going to do if that happens? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I mean, Clark, I'm watching these teams. Okay. The Browns have 9 wins. Okay. They have Joe Flacco. Their quarterbacks this year have been, half decent. Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, PJ Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, they're probably going to win 10 games. They need one win out of the last 3. They're going to win 10 games. The Colts have 8 wins. Okay. They've had, they started out with Anthony Richardson, and then they've had
Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew, right? They got a brand new coach, Shane Steichen, right? So they look like they might win 10 wins. Denver might have 10, might get 10 wins. I know they lost to Detroit yesterday, but the rest of their schedule is all winnable games. And now the Dolphins have the tiebreaker over Denver. But the thing is, Clark, if the Dolphins don't win another game, like I know that I'm watching the numbers, and Dolphins have a 97% chance of winning or making the playoffs, and I'm just going, yeah, but there could be 4 or 5 teams, wildcard teams, with 10 wins. So I don't know about that. But anyway, so I'm thinking about, my thought on that, or my theory is, well, Clark, I mean, I look back at the last 20, since the Dolphins last won a playoff game, right? They won a playoff game the last time in 2000. Right. So that's 23 seasons. Okay. Not including, this would be number 24, 23 seasons since that happened. Right. The Dolphins have won 8 wins in a season, 12 out of the 23 times. So about every other year they win at least 8 games. Now there's some 9s in there. There's some 10s. There's an 11, sometimes they win more than that, but mostly there are between 6 and 11 wins. That's basically what the last 23 years have basically been. And, so my contention is, why do the Dolphins need to pay Tua $40 million a year so we can win, 9 or 10 games? Like, that's about what we usually do anyway. So my contention is, why would we do that when all of these other teams are winning with, whoever else at quarterback, and they're winning between 8 and 10 games? So what are we getting out of this? Like, we drafted Tua, we're going to give him this contract, and what do we get out of it? We get to be 9 and 8. Or this year maybe we'll be 10 and 7 or 11 and 6, whatever it is,
Right.
So it's not like we're I know everybody loves Tua, I get it, but if you just go wins above replacement, like, what are we doing? Like, we're better off. You're better off just getting a veteran, drafting a young guy, and then kind of seeing what happens, because the rest of the team is really good. And you see what happens when you have Tyreek Hill. Boy, it makes your life a lot easier.
Right. And you can do that if you're not paying your quarterback a bunch of money. And then here, I'll put this, I'll share this real quick. I made a graphic. Screen. All right, hang on. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I wanted to break down. I did a really deep dive into stats on a couple days ago, just to kind of see, because I had seen some stuff before the season started. What's Tua's record versus playoff teams, and I wanted to include this year. So I looked at Tua's entire career up to this point. The Jets game today is not included in this. I'll add this, in the future. But so, I mean, if you look at, now granted, part of the problem is that it's like, a lot of times you don't play a lot of playoff teams during the regular season. So that's only 15 games, and there's a lot more starts that he's had in his career. He's had a lot more starts against non-playoff teams. But I do think that some of these stats are pretty drastic, especially when you compare them to where's the next one? Oh, when you compare to his record versus non-playoff teams. So he's winning a lot, a greater percentage of his games. His completion percentage goes way up. Yards per attempt goes up. His TD to interception ratio goes up, which for people who don't totally understand that statistic, it's basically you want a higher TD to interception ratio because, if it's like 1-to-1, it's like, well, for every 1 touchdown he throws 1 interception. But if it's 2.9 or closer to 3, that means for every 3 touchdowns he throws 1 interception. So that's much better. I put the first downs in there, like the average number of first downs that the team gets when in games that he's playing, that he starts and finishes versus non-playoff teams, is higher than it is versus playoff teams. So anyway, just some stats. I mean, because we complain about Tua all the time, and some of it is here. I'll take that off. Some of it's based on the eye test, but some of it really is based on the stats. When you look at the stats, he is significantly better against non-playoff teams than he is against playoff teams. That being said, I understand that most quarterbacks don't, their stats maybe kind of go down when they're playing against better competition. That's just to be expected. But there really is a significant drop-off. And if you actually look at it, like when they lost Tyreek Hill in the middle of the Titans game, like their offense just stopped. I mean, they were struggling to get first downs. They were struggling to move the ball. And so, to your point, it's like, do you really want to pay Tua that much money when he's not a guy who really, he's not someone who, he's not a force multiplier. Okay. The things around Tua raise his level of play. If things are bad around Tua, his level of play goes down. And we saw that especially the first 2 years when he didn't have Tyreek Hill and Mike McDaniel calling up plays, because I do think that's a pretty significant advantage.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and that was the other part of the, what I was thinking about. Like, look, we've got the coach. The Dolphins have the right coach, right? McDaniel's legit. Like, you can see, he knows what he's doing. They've got the best receiver in the NFL, right? So why, so it's like, yeah, why do we need to pay for this guy who, can't really do it against good teams and can't really do it unless he's got, the great stuff like Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill with him, or Jalen Waddle, right? So it's just kind of like it just kind of blows my mind. Like, I don't think, now am I saying that Tua's a bad quarterback? No, I don't think he's bad. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just think, the way this all this in a salary cap league, all this stuff is affected. The way that you build your team, that has it affects everything, the salary of everybody. And you're gonna give this quarterback a huge contract, and I'm not sure that he's better than a replacement quarterback most of the time. So
right. And that, I think another point I'll just make here is that I understand that you can make stats say whatever you want them to say. And so I get that sometimes some stats are kind of flawed, and you have to compare this to, like, well, how are other quarterbacks against, winning teams or playoff teams? That's something I need to look at. But, one of the things is, I'm not saying he has to win every game every time he plays an elite team, but I've just seen so many examples of when he's playing a good team, the offense just disappears. I mean, they struggle to get first downs. They struggle to move the ball. They struggle to do anything. And so my concern is basically that, when he's out there, like against a better team, you basically feel like if the game starts to get away from you, he can't reel it back. And when you have an elite quarterback who has, elite athletic ability or just elite arm talent or just elite ability to read defenses, he can make up for, some shortcomings of your team and give you a chance. It's the same thing we talk about with, like, Josh Allen all the time. You can criticize Josh Allen, and does he turn the ball over too much? Yeah. But there's games that the Bills have a chance in purely because they have Josh Allen playing quarterback, and he can drag people with him to try to get the team over the top. And the thing is, with a quarterback like Tua, like you said, he's not a bad quarterback, but I think you can kind of throw him around into this kind of stew with this group of quarterbacks who are like 15th, 16th, 17th best in the league, and like, you can win games with those guys. And if you have a good situation around them, then yeah, maybe you can have 1 year where you make like a deep playoff run. But there's going to be limits because they can't. There's not a lot that they can do outside of the X's and O's. And people might come back at me and say, well, I've seen him do things here and there. I'm like, okay, fine. You can find me a couple of examples of, like, oh, against the Chargers this year or against the Ravens last year. But those games are a year apart. They're also at the beginning of the year. games at the end of the year are a lot harder than they are at the beginning of the year. So the exception usually just proves the rule.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens the rest of the season. The Dolphins have everything out in front of them. But what I do wonder is, though, I just wonder, like, what does McDaniel think now that he's got to spend this much time with him? Because the play calling today was pretty conservative. Like, it was pretty, all right, we don't want to screw this up. And even with that, Tua threw a ball right to one of the Jets linebackers at one point in the game.
Yeah.
So I wonder, what does McDaniel think? Because McDaniel was in San Francisco when they had Jimmy Garoppolo, remember, where they were constantly trying to replace him. Like, this guy doesn't, even though they were getting everything they could out of him, right? They still wanted to upgrade the quarterback. So I'm interested to know, like, what are those meetings like after the season when McDaniel sits down with Chris Greer? What are they saying? Because it's obvious that Tyreek Hill is earning every dollar that we're spending on him. There's no doubt about that. The guy's unbelievable.
And the stuff about some of those interceptions or almost interceptions that Tua throws, we've seen this throughout his career. It's not something that's really gotten better. And that's why we question how much defense is he really reading. I mean, it feels like a lot of times he's just dropping back, planting his back foot and throwing, which that's probably what they need to do because their offensive line is bad. And that's what he's usually best at. But it ends up getting you into situations where sometimes he throws a ball and you're like, dude, why the hell are you throwing that? Like, you threw it, like, that's either an inaccurate throw or you didn't read where the defender was going to be and you shouldn't have thrown the ball there. So yeah, that's something that's just...
It seems eerily similar to Jimmy Garoppolo. It seems eerily similar to the problems that San Francisco had with Jimmy Garoppolo year after year after year.
Right.
But yeah, so we'll move on. Let's move on from that. We don't want people to accuse us of bashing our own team.
We're glad they won. So
that's right. Hey, they won. It's still alive. We still got we got a chance. We got a chance to do some damage this year. So that's a good thing.